If you find that working with solid colored fills is a little bit bland for your liking, well, don't despair, we can use gradients inside of Flash. And Flash actually gives us a lot of different options and control over these gradients. And to demonstrate, I'm going to create two basic shapes. We're going to start with a circle. We'll just create an oval tool and we'll just create our circle, and then we're just going to grab a rectangle. Hold down Shift and we'll draw a square. So here we go, we have our circle and our square. As you noticed, I used the blue for the fill color. Doesn't really matter what color you use. And we can just click once to select our fill, and we can change it. If you click now under our fill color, you'll notice that we actually have some different gradient presets down here. Let's click on one, and we click away, and you notice now we've got this nice radial gradient which gives this ball a real more three-dimensional look. Let's grab the square on the other side, and let's just grab a linear gradient. We'll grab the first option, and you can see that is a lot more interesting. Now these can still be selected the same way simply by clicking, and you can change them back to a solid fill at any time, or back to a gradient. Different types of gradients. Now, if we hold the Shift key, we can select two fills at the same time and change these together instantaneously. So let's go back to our red one, and we're just going to click away. So you see we've got some good little bits of control there, but what we can do is we can actually transform these gradients. Because as you notice, we've just got our gradient there right in the center. What if we wanted to change the shape of it? Well, we can actually grab this tool here. Under Free Transform, you've got the Gradient Transform tool. Once you select the Gradient Transform tool, we can actually adjust the center point. So now we can have the light coming from underneath or from above. We can change the shape. We can give it more of an oval. And then once we do that, we can grab this option here and we can actually rotate our gradient. Change our shape back. Or we can change the size. We can make it large. It gives a very soft effect. Or very small for a very pinpoint effect. We'll grab our center point, drag that out maybe to here. And you can see we have a lot of different options there, working with the different gradient transforms. And we'll just increase the size of it. There we go. And of course, when we're on the square, it works exactly the same way. Now we could change the type of gradient here. Like, let's go to a linear gradient. And you'll notice with the linear gradient, we can change the center point here. And all that really does is just changes where it changes there. Gives us more abrupt changes in those points. The other thing we can do is we can change the angle. So if you want to go from a horizontal to a vertical, you just click it and drag it around like that. Okay, well what happens if, say for instance, I'm working on a shape there. Let me just transform this shape really. Well, actually, let me just delete it. And I'll just draw another rectangle here. What happens if I'm working on a rectangle like this with the gradient, and I want to transform it, and I flip it around? Well, we've got this thing, it doesn't fill it up. Well, we also got the size there. We can drag that. Even though the arrows go to left to right, you can drag it up and down. So there you go. You can actually change the size and the angle of the linear gradient. Now you may notice that when you go over the edges here, it just goes directly from black to white. Well, we have more control over this, and we also have control over these gradients. We're not stuck just with these presets. If we let's grab our selection tool here. Let's go back over here and let's open up our color palette. Our color palette here is where we have all our control over our gradients and also where we can create new gradients. So with this selected here, we can go and we can use any different one we want, choosing the presets inside the color palette here. Notice we've got a black to white gradient. We can click on any one of these stops to change it. Notice that the top of it is black. If I click here, the top is black. That means it's selected. Notice this one is black, all we need to do is move this tint slider up to make it white, or bring it down to make it gray. If we want to add color, we choose color from in here. But you'll notice that the color is not applied because it's black. We just move the tint up a little bit, and now we can adjust those colors. Same on the other side. Let's choose another color. And we'll bring the tint down to the middle. And now that the tint's in the middle, you can change the color however you like. And you can see we're creating our own gradients here. We can bring the edges in there to make a more abrupt gradient. We can pull them out. If we want to add another point, we just simply click in the middle, and now we can add a third color. And you can see we can start to create these kind of gradients. Let's create a metallic gradient. Here we go, we've got a nice black to white. Well, let's click here, we're going to add this. We're going to add a little bit of gray in there. Let's click there. Add a little bit of white. Click again, we'll give it a really strong white. And click again, we'll drop it down. Notice we now have this very metallic kind of a looking gradient. So let's select it once. Now, if you want to add this to the fills here, we can actually add it by clicking up here and then choosing Add Swash. And by doing that, now it's added to the swash there, and we can quickly apply it to another gradient. Let's choose this shape here, and now we'll grab our shape there from the color swash. Now this is really useful if we want to transform this. We'll grab our transform, we'll give it a nice angle there, and you can see it gives us a nice metallic sheen. Now you may have noticed as we're playing around, you may have seen this option here, overflow. Well, what this overflow does is when our gradient is smaller than our shape, by default, the black is here, or that's the one side of the gradient, and then the other side of the gradient fills those empty spaces. You can change this by continuing the gradient, and this will repeat it, or you can fill those spaces by reversing the gradient in there, and you can get some really interesting results there. And notice as you increase that, they go away. As you decrease it, you get this repeating gradient effect, which is really interesting. And that's using the overflow. Now at any time you can just select that and you can go back to your other gradient, and that just goes back to whatever gradient we're working on. Now we can change the type of gradient. Here we're working with a radial. We can simply change that to linear, and now it just goes from black to white, black to red. Same thing here, we're working on linear, we can change this to radial. And we now get this radial gradient. Now, as you see, we can simply add these at any time. We can add this preset here by choosing Add Swash. Now there's another way of applying these gradients, and that's to actually go into Swash's palette. Now you'll notice if I select it here and I choose the different gradients, that they're being applied just by using the eyedropper, because this is selected. That's with our selection tool on. Now there's another way to do this. If we grab our paint bucket tool, we can actually click, and where we click will be the center, notice that, of the gradient. Let's grab this one here for a better result. Wherever you click will become the center. Now when you use a linear gradient, this obviously is just going to fill it with a gradient. See that? It doesn't really work that way because it only works with the radial gradients when we do that. So you can simply click in the top there to add your gradient like that, but you can still at any time go into the gradient transform and change it. Now if you have a gradient that you want to remove from the swashes, simply select it here and then just go under here, and then you would just choose Delete Swash. And we can do the same with that one. Choose Delete Swash. So as you can see, you can build up your own library, which can be used again and again, and you can apply these gradients, or you can do it with the Paint Bucket tool. Simply click. Wherever you're clicking, you're just adding. Notice that when you use the Paint Bucket tool as well, that you don't have to have the objects selected. It'll just apply it wherever you click. So that gives you a pretty good overview of how to use gradients inside of Flash.